Mackenzie,
Lemar.
Oscar noms have been
Oh my fucking
announced.
god.
We're recording this the last week of January. And how are you feeling? We know you have your annual tradition of trying to watch every single film that was nominated. So, how are you feeling looking at the list?
I'm stretching. I'm ready. I got this.
Limber up.
Okay. Um, I'm actually optimistic. Um, so the day they came out, so they were already late, y'all. So for completely reasonable reasons, all the fires in LA have delayed the announcement. So they came out. I want to say like 5 days later than they were supposed to. So the day they came out, I was like, I have to fucking go. So I immediately made a spreadsheet that I, as y'all have heard before, will share it on our link in bio on our Instagram, where I like to share such things with you guys. So we have 50 Oscar nominated films this year. That's inclusive, of course, like long feature films. And then there's about 15 of those that are short films, which can be usually like 40 minutes or less. I think the longest one that I saw was like 37 minutes. So I put everything on there. I put like what's nominated, where you can find it, like is it streaming, is it in theaters, is it in both, where you can find it if it's already available, and then the runtime. Because as you can imagine, this takes a lot of coordination to squeeze all of these in, and I have to literally allocate when do I have time to watch all of these. So out of the 50, I started at 11 films, 12 films actually that I had seen, and I'm now at 17.
So, you've
So
watched
they
six
released
in
two
like the
days ago.
last, 2 days?
Yeah.
What a blistering pace.
Oh my God. And also, I had to watch these. Like, I had to watch It's What's Inside. I had to watch Kneecap, which I hadn't seen yet. And I did rewatch My Old Ass. So actually, I've watched, three additional films outside of that. So,
Was
yeah.
there anything, appreciate you always making that spreadsheet and sharing it. There's also obviously reference Mackenzie's spreadsheet because it's awesome. In the event that things do switch streaming services, I wanted to plug there's an app called Just Watch that's really
Oh,
good
yeah.
for searching a movie and seeing what streaming
But
services
my
it's currently
spreadsheet
on.
is better. And I say this
Do
because
you
Just
update
Watch,
it though?
I do. I update it the whole
Okay,
month
okay,
because I have to
okay.
keep finding them. Like some of them you'll see in there. There's a bunch of them that are right now still TBD, right? Like they're not showing in theaters yet. There's not a streaming service that has them yet. There's like a dozen plus right now that are TBD. So I have to keep working to find them. They're either about to release or they come out on something else. So I have to update the links. I have to update where I'm going to find them. I will look for showings like on a daily or every other day
Okay.
basis, and I will go see a showing if I find it.
Well, in
So
that
yeah,
case,
it's a living, breathing spreadsheet all the time.
I'll just cut this part then. We don't need to plug the app if
No,
you're
but I think it
updating.
is a great resource. Just Watch is a great resource. It didn't used to exist, which is how I like began the
Mhm.
spreadsheet actually. And then Just Watch I do still use as a baseline because they have built this app that I think is brilliant, but they do miss a lot of things. So there's like
Mm.
5 or 6 links that I found that they don't show on there, and a lot of them are for short films. Like for example, a bunch of the short films you can stream through the New Yorker,
Hmm.
and they don't have that, they don't know that. There's a bunch that are on Vimeo that are streamable on Vimeo that they don't show. So like what they're searching on there are large platforms, like think HBO, Paramount, Hulu, Disney, all Prime, all those. They're not searching like smaller streaming access. They're not even searching YouTube. So a couple of these are on YouTube, for example. So yeah, I would say the combo is great. My spreadsheet plus Just Watch, and you will be able to find everything.
So you say Vimeo is what I took away from that. Vimeo?
Vimeo,
I say
Vimeo, I think
Vimeo
so.
because to me it sounded like
Vimeo.
video. So listeners, I'm not saying I feel strongly one way or the other. I just need to know if it's a American site or a French site. Listeners, let us know if you say
Tell us
Vimeo
what it
or
is. I don't
Vimeo.
know. I just Vimeo. I think
Was
maybe I have said Vimeo. Think
Well,
I don't know.
unrelated to that though, we can dig. We'll dig more into this. Obviously, we're going to cover a bunch of Oscar films in February, nominees and whatnot, and we'll probably talk about different ones that you've caught. But like anything immediately, 2 minutes or less, jump out at you from the nominees.
Well, interestingly, Amelia Perez is the one that's like one of the leading nominations, and it's interesting because it's a somewhat controversial film at this point for a number of things. There's like the use of AI in the singing aspects. There's where it was filmed and produced and things like that related to the cultures that it's supposed to represent. I have not yet seen it. Transparently, I've been waiting because I have an unrelated plan for that. So, I found that interesting, having not seen it yet, how many nominations that it got. The other thing I would say is that I think I felt like it was largely somewhat predictable, actually. The ones that were on there, I was like, checks out, checks out. There were some ones that I was bummed weren't on there. One of the ones we're talking about today, for example, Kneecap had submitted and they didn't get nominated for international film. So there were a few things like that, but I am glad that things like the substance are represented, not super, pervasive in all the categories, but I was glad to see something like that. I thought A Complete Unknown was a good, like, under the wire one. It screened just in time to be relevant for these nominations, and I thought it was worthwhile. Flow is one that I think is really worthwhile. It's great that it's on there. So yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting mix. It feels a little thrown together. I feel like because of all the things that are going on and just knowing what I've shared in the past on the pod about the way nominations are voted for, I think there were a lot of people who had a hard time working this in and getting their votes in genuinely. And so I feel like there's a lot of very well-known selections on here. Feels like even more so than prior years. So I wasn't terribly surprised by a lot of them. I think they're all interesting choices, but I wasn't terribly surprised.
Yeah, I haven't seen Amelia Perez yet, but like the thing I keep hearing it compared to is Crash, and not in a good way, but of just a movie that's like designed for a specific segment of audience, and it's hokey and schlocky and it doesn't feel authentic, but it's like being eaten up by critics for some reason. So I haven't seen it, but I'm just hearing it compared to like previous nominees where it's just like what this is trying to do is just so phony in a way. I think Crash, I heard Green Book mentioned, which again I didn't see Green Book, so I can't speak to that, but that's what I'm hearing it mentioned in conjunction with. So.
That it sounded like, but the things that people say about Green Book are true is what I would say. Yeah. Interesting. Maybe we have to cover that then, because it feels like it's so like topical and important. I think there's a lot of interesting debates to be had about that one that we may want to cover. Y'all tell us, actually, because I'm curious who's seen it. The people that I know personally who have seen it, which are not many, love it. Love it.
Okay.
But the people I don't know well, obviously, like I said, the reviews and the news articles and things that we're talking about, they have a lot of negative things to say. So it could be an interesting conversation. We shall see.
Awesome.
Welcome back to We Drink and We Watch Things. I'm Mackenzie.
I'm Lamar.
Oh, and I'm Neal.
There it is.
Nailed it. 10 out of 10 on the dismount.
I didn't know if I was supposed to be in that.
No, you are. I like it. I like it. Okay, so
I just said my first name. That's it.
Y'all don't need to know who he is yet. Really, we're gonna get there. But Neal's here.
Neal.
This guy Neal is here.
Damn it, guys. I said we needed to do a dry run. I said we should do a dry run.
He didn't. Don't let him lie to you. He didn't say that. We have it down. It's fine. If you can't tell, we have a guest today, right? We are continuing Fan Jan-esque. I don't know. This is maybe our Fan Jan edition because we picked these. We're very excited to share. And we wanted to have Neal on where we're going to talk about our 3 favorite films for 2024. We each picked one. And we have Mr. Neal Reddy on the pod who chose one as well, recommended to us, which we're very excited to talk about. So first of all, welcome, Neal. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, hello.
I'm Neal. If you don't already know, if you don't already know who Neal is, 2 for 2. If you don't already know who he is or recognize the name, he is, I think, our first actual filmmaker on the pod. Correct me if I'm wrong, Lamar. I think it's the first
college films excluded. Yes.
Yeah, college filmmaking excluded. Like actual.
Yeah.
We've had several like
filmmakers.
We've had several, film majors, things like that. But I think we've only
I say filmmaker. I just make Vines, even though no one's on Vine anymore. I just do 5 seconds.
You're like the one person still on there.
I'm
going to join Vine just for you. Just for you.
I make about 1 Vine a year. It takes me about a year to make a 5-second Vine. And technically, I'm a filmmaker. I'm in the academy.
Prolific Vine filmmaker. Yep. So yeah, if you don't already know, he actually has made a short film. It is called Barely Breathing. We will be talking about it today. It made some festival rounds. It actually came to Austin. If you're a local Austin native, I did not get to see it while I was here. I was out of town for work, but this is, one of the many things we're going to talk about today. And you may also know him from being a hero on the first reboot season of Queer Eye, which is how I found you, by the way. I'm way behind, so don't tell the Fab Five. I'm way behind. But I saw the first 2 or 3 seasons religiously, but there were too many tears.
That's a lot of
too many tears.
Yeah,
I can't.
We get the point.
Every season is so emotional. Anyway, you were in the first season, so you got. I did watch that one. So fun to watch, so sweet. So I think a lot of people know you from that, and then I sort of followed you because I had heard about your filmmaking, and then for those who don't know the background of how Neal joined us today, I just started DMing you. And
on all DMs. I don't, but sometimes I respond to things about movies a lot because
It was mostly movies, y'all. I didn't slide into his DMs, y'all. It was like he was posting about movies. I was commenting because y'all know I can't shut my mouth when it's about a movie. So eventually, we just chatted a little bit about some of our favorite films and wanting to talk more about it, and asked you to join, and here you are. So we're thrilled to have you. Thank you for joining.
Well, thanks for having me. Yeah, I say yes to any podcast and to any DM about movies.
That's very flattering. Thank you for being here, Neal.
If y'all wanted to slide into his DMs now, you know the secret sauce.
I'm just giving away the secrets. People I've tried for years. I've responded to all your stories. I'm like, if you respond to the ones about movies, I will argue with you.
Right. I think your count was the thing that got me too, because it was 170 something plus films last year that you said that you had watched. So
yeah, at least 170. Yeah, it's a number.
I hadn't really done my count, but I think it's similar because if you don't already know this, Neal, as well, I do. Well, I watch movies all the time. Obviously, we have this podcast, so I'm watching at least 52 films a year there, and then I watch all the Oscar-nominated films every year, which is a fucking feat. Which I'm in the middle of right now, and we'll talk about in a minute. So yeah, we watch a lot of fucking movies here as well, and I was very excited to chat with a fellow cinephile. We're gonna get into all of our favorite picks today and talk about how you're such an expert, because again, you saw 170 something films in 2024.
I'm not an expert. I'm more just the nerd that likes watching movies. Movies are like my favorite thing. Favorite time kill is a movie. Since I was a kid, I've always just been enamored by them. And so,
do you go to theaters or do you go?
And so
you watch them at home? Okay.
I'm on AMC A-list, and you can see 3 movies a week for $20 a month. And so for me, I'm like, I don't care if the movie's shitty. I'm not paying for it. I'm just gonna go see the movie and watch it in the theater because that's the experience I like. And so, the majority of the movies I see like 2 to 3 a week at least on A-list a week. And then the rest I saw at film festivals, and then I watch at my house. But I prefer to watch stuff in the theater. So shout out to AMC. If you guys are near an AMC, get A-list. It's $20 a month. Across the country, you can watch 3. We're not sponsored by them. I'm just telling you.
We're not sponsored.
Not yet.
I was going to say, also, we're going to have opposing sponsors here because I have the Alamo Drafthouse season pass, which is a similar concept.
We don't have a Drafthouse here in Atlanta.
That's true. You can't.
I travel a lot. And so.
Yeah.
And not to complicate things worse, but I just pirate everything. No, that's not true. I pay to see films, pay to see movies. Don't steal. You wouldn't steal a car. Maybe you would.
The way it works out mathematically, it's like $21 a month if you get A-list, but it's $19 a ticket if you buy a single ticket. So if you see more than one movie a month, it's worth it. And if you get it, you end up seeing more than one movie a month because you're like, I'm not paying.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Alamo's is actually daily, one a day. And I have had days where I saw 5 in a week,
That's
depending.
Wild.
So sometimes especially during Oscar season, I have to do that or I will not make my deadline. So we got
Drafthouse is a great theater. I've been to that one in Austin before. It's awesome.
Where did you screen when you came to Austin? Where were you screening?
We screened at 2 places. One of them, I can't remember, was like a hall of some sort, and the other was a theater. I can't remember the name of the theater, but the Austin Film Festival screens at 2 spots, and so
I can't remember. I mix them all up because there's so many. There's Austin Film Festival, There's
South by Southwest.
South by Southwest.
AFF is like, I don't say the more indie one, but they're the more writer focused of the film festivals between South by and Austin. They're both huge. Both have thousands of people. But Austin Film Festival focuses on writers and films, and they kind of take chances. And South by is great, but it's corporate. It's huge.
It's corporate now. Yeah. You know, C3 bought it, and it's all a bit more corporate and a little bit more mainstream.
It's an event. Whereas it's Austin Film Festival is like a lot of people that really love movies, that like writing movies, and that's where they go.
It's like the festival style. I feel like it's a real, like when you think of a film festival, that's really what it's like. And I did used to use scripts, read scripts rather, for Austin Film Festival as well. And it got to be so much, because they take so many submissions and they read, if y'all didn't know, they read every single one.
Yeah.
And they're filtered through a ton of readers like I used to do. And it takes so much time. I mean, you're reading like, I don't know, 50 to 100 scripts in a couple of months.
Last year they had, I want to say, like almost 30,000 script submissions and 8,000 film submissions. So it's a lot. And they do take the time to read every single script. So it's crazy.
I had to opt out because I was not able to pull my weight. And I was like, you know, they ask me every year, and I was like, I'm sorry. I love how seriously we take this. I'm not doing a good enough job, so I had to opt out. But it was a really incredible experience.
Maybe not 30, maybe it was like 13. I can't remember, but somewhere it's just it's an insane amount.
It's so many. I mean, I know how many they gave me, so it's a lot. It is a lot. And again, a testament to your film getting into the film festival. That's amazing. So
it's really cool.
All right, well, let's get into it. We have so many things we want to cover today. We do, as you know, drink a thing every time we get together, and because we have 3 movies, we did each bring a different drink. So we'll go in order. Lemar, what are you drinking today?
Yeah, so mine is inspired by It's What's Inside, which we'll get to a little later today. But as always, these have been crafted by @CraftWorld, so follow him and he'll share the recipes and whatnot. But this one is 2 ounces of apple brandy, 0.75 ounces of lemon juice, 0.75 ounces of simple syrup, half an ounce of Chambord, and you shake that sucker, strain it, and then top it off with bubbles if you want. So Prosecco, whatever kind of bubbles you got there.
If you're feeling fancy.
And we're calling this the out-of-body experience, not to give anything away from It's What's
Let me see it. What does it look like?
It came out like this odd... I was surprised with the Chambord in there, like the color, but mixing with the brandy. I thought it'd be darker. But it feels like the brandy kind of overtook the purple of the Chambord. So
you so extra in your coupe glass. Adorable.
I follow the instructions given to me by Craft.
That's true. You were told a coupe.
He gets mad when I don't, so...
He does get mad. Neal, what are you drinking?
I didn't realize it had to be inspired by the movie.
It doesn't have to be. You can bring whatever you want.
I'm just having bourbon.
I gave Neal shitty instructions, which were, we can design a drink for you, or you can bring one of your favorite drinks.
I don't drink anymore, so this is just sparkling water. Like, I use Topo Chico, but you can use whatever plain sparkling water. Fresh lime juice, and then a little lemonade Neo, and then you have a nice refreshing beverage.
It looks like the substance, right? Doesn't it look like
kind of like we should have used that for our substance app.
Yeah, this is my substance.
Yeah, I love it.
It's just something that it's the lime juice with the lemonade Neo. It tastes like a natural Sprite, basically, all natural Sprite.
Oh, okay, that's refreshing. I like it. Well, I, as per usual, am doing, well, not per usual, but as much as possible, I like to do a good bourbon cocktail. So I am doing one that is 2 ounces.
You're going to be like, me per usual is just going to be doing meth. And I'm like,
you know, I got to get through these somehow. You know, you got to power through in some way. But yeah, no, we're doing bourbon. We're doing 2 ounces of bourbon, half ounce of lemon, at 3/4 of an ounce of a cranberry juice, and a half ounce of, wait for it, maple syrup, which I hate. If you're new here, I don't love maple syrup, but he insists it will be delicious. So we're going to find out. And this is the wise ass smash. So for mild ass. So cheers, y'all.
Cheers.
Cheers.
I will say that
Alrighty.
Neal's the color there. It is kind of reminiscent of the movie poster for Kneecap, though. It has that also like kind of neon.
Yeah, that
green,
yellow,
so
yeah,
there
that
you
yellow
go.
yellow pea color. It's exactly.
We can edit that out and pretend like you planned it if you want. You're like, I was going for that kneecap color, you know?
Exactly what I was going for. This drink here of Topo Chico and fresh lime juice screams Irish Revolution and fighting the English government.
Yes, as traditionally
Yeah.
drank in Irish pubs.
Yeah,
Homemade Sprite.
traditional.
They use a lot of Mio in Ireland. I don't know if you guys know it's a water enhancer.
I do know that. I can just picture it. Yeah, sitting in the pub, add it to
Yeah.
your drink. I love
Yeah,
it.
right after they fight the government, they're just like, what we need is some sparkling water, some Mio, some fresh lime juice. Let's line them up.
I'm also reminded of that Mitch Hedberg stand-up joke from way back when, where he's like, they say Sprite's lemon and lime, but I tried to make it at home, and there's more to it than that.
There's more steps. Who
Yeah.
knew? Who knew? All right, homies. Well, we are going to blow through 3 full-length feature films and 1 short film today. So we are not going to fucks with the, no spoiler section. If you can't tell, these are some of our favorites of 2024. So we're going to just get right into it. So turn around, don't drown. It's spoiler time. And I figure let's start. I'm going to just go in order of y'all on my screen. Lemar, let's start with It's What's Inside, shall we? Can you tell us why you picked this one and, share what prompted this choice of all the movies of 2024?
Yeah, so for me, I think I interpreted this not as, hey, what was your favorite film of 2024? I took it more as what's kind of a hidden gem. What's one that you don't think everyone out there has seen? It didn't get maybe mass marketed or got mismarketed in this case, I think, because this was sort of Netflix got the rights to this. I don't believe it had a theatrical release, and it was sort of marketed as a horror film. Like it came out, I think, in September, October.
Definitely was. Definitely
And it doesn't land as that at all. I think the way I describe the plot is it's kind of like a Knives Out mystery with a Black Mirror tech twist, right? And you're sort of figuring these things out. And I just think it does so many things very well. And the other thing that the reason that I really wanted to discuss it was this is a first time writer director. And it has that vibe for me of like the first time. I don't want to, build it up too much. He's only done this one film, but it feels like the first time I watched a Guy Ritchie film or the first time I watched a Tarantino. It just feels different. And it feels like a new director, writer, potentially starting something great.
That's awesome. I
didn't
totally agree.
I didn't know it was his first time. I knew it was like a, pretty, I won't say low budget, but it wasn't like a big, big budget thing. And I thought it was really well done. I thought the writing was great. I thought it was tight, and you can tell they worked within like a framework of like a certain amount of money because nothing in the movie was like crazy special effects. Even the machine was very like analog.
simple.
They used.
Yeah, it's like very 80s looking.
Yeah. But I agree. I agree with the well done comment because you wouldn't assume this is a first-time director, writer, filmmaker in that way. Like it feels very cohesive, very well put together, well shot. The story's well constructed, I think, on the whole. And I think the characters feel really fully developed. And I know you mentioned to me, Lemar, last time we talked about it, because I was like, oh, of course you picked a horror movie. If you didn't know Neal, he picks a lot of horror movies.
Oh, okay.
And so I was like, and he's like, no, I swear it's not. It's like Knives Out-ish, whatever. And while I was watching it, I was like, okay. Like I see what you're saying here, where it feels like you're kind of solving this puzzle. And I thought I did want to talk about how it's shot. Like I when they do have this, all these different pair ups, it seems like there's these little duos at various times where you're getting them side by side and you kind of get this preview of it. Like I just love the way that it is shot and the transitions from scene to scene and all of that. So, I mean, the big spoiler here is that it's a machine that helps you switch bodies, which is like, I don't know, it's like Freaky Friday on steroids. It was wild.
Which is in the trailer though, so I don't think that's giving away too much.
I was gonna say, yeah, I feel like we like Googled it later, and I was like, these summaries are giving away a lot.
Yeah.
Luckily, I didn't read any of those first, though. I will say it was like a very fresh experience for me.
I think I was told specifically, hey, just don't read anything about it. Don't read the description. Just go hit play. So the first time I watched it, I wasn't aware of what exactly was going to happen. So that scene at the beginning when they first click go on the button on the machine the first time, I'm watching it, not sure what's happening. You're just seeing the reactions of these people, like this kind of Brady Bunch shot of all 9 of them, like being like, what the fuck? And like, I didn't know what was going on yet. So for me, it was more of a reveal than that.
Yeah.
But I love, like you were saying, Mackenzie, just the visuals in this. They have, on second watch, I'm picking up on new things, and they have that artwork at the beginning where she's showing sort of the color swatches or like the see-through things, and she's like, look, you put this color and then it's different. And they utilize that throughout the film when they're showing the real bodies inside. The bodies are in red lighting, these things are in green lighting. Like, it just plays with color, and like you said, just the framing, the different shots, really, really creatively.
Yeah, I thought they really, because it could have been a disaster, because the way the movie's set up, it's a psychological thriller. It's not like horror at all, but
Right.
it could be really hard to follow because you have to pay attention to everything in the names. But the fact that they had that little red swatch that would show you the reveal, really just, it was almost like a cheat sheet, because I forgot sometimes who was talking. They would like show the thing. I'm like, that's who's talking. So,
I totally agree with that. I think you could have easily gotten so lost and so confused if they hadn't have done that. Because you really, at the beginning, I mean, you do get these established interpersonal relationships. You understand how they relate to each other on the whole pretty quickly. And I feel like they do that pretty deftly, actually, where it doesn't feel like, here, I'm explaining a line of dialogue that gives you the background story of 3 people at once, right? It felt a little more organic than that. But you don't have all these people's names memorized yet. You're not immersed yet. So yeah, it is very hard to keep track of, like, wait a second, who's in what body. And then even just the physical name tags they start to use, the Polaroid, I was like, bless, I would be so confused.
I think it just goes to show who the writer and director, is it a he?
It is a he, I believe. Greg Jardine.
Yeah, he was real smart, because I think he had such a clever idea, and it could go way south, way fast. Some people get so enamored by their clever idea that they just don't care about the audience, but you could tell that he really cared about the audience. He wasn't trying to make this like highfalutin art film. He was trying to make a film that people would be like, oh, yeah, And it was really cool, because he did have a really high concept, but he brought it down to a level that everyone could kind of follow along with, which I thought was really dope.
Yeah, it's very ambitious. I will say, I mean, like I said, I don't know that it was my number 1 film of the year. I wouldn't give this a perfect 10 out of 10, because I think at times some of the camera work is a little too ambitious. Like, there's a lot of spinning and I'm just like, we don't have to do something creative every single shot. It's like a kid getting his first camera. So I will say that sometimes it veers a little bit off the rails. But the other thing that I wanted to touch on was just the actors. Like, to cast something like this where you're going to have to portray potentially 4 different personalities. Even the actor who plays, I want to get this right, Cyrus, James Marconi, I believe, Marconi. He's such a fabulous douche in the first half hour of the film, and you just hate his face. But then when he eventually has these other characters inside of him, and he's portraying a stoner, or he's doing this other, like, it's so cool to see them get to go outside of their comfort zones a little bit, to see their range. And I just think it speaks volumes to how talented they must have been on the set here.
Real quick question. What did you think of the ending? Did you think it came quickly? I feel like it kind of, the movie ended, and I thought it was like going to be like another part to the movie.
Yeah, I'll say it's kind of like, I broke it into, in my notes, I broke it into 3 parts. I was like, the beginning, my biggest nitpick at the beginning is they sort of have to establish these not stereotypical, like prototypical characters, but it's like, okay, we have the sort of nature girl, and then we have the artist, and because we need to know who they are later in the film.
They need to be different
model.
enough.
Yes. So it's like we have these sort of prototypes,
but none of these people would actually hang out together, let's be honest.
Like, it is weird, right? Like, but the middle act is so fucking good. I just love that you're kind of, as a viewer, playing the game yourself and looking for these little ticks and giveaways that have been established. And I, at this point, I picked up this go round of, like, they say very early in the film, Forbes has a really bad temper. He's got a horrible temper, and you never see that for a reason, right? And then fast forward to the ending, and the first thing you see is, oh shit. So you kind of figure out what's going on. It does feel, though, that last 10 minutes does feel sudden, and it wraps up a little, I guess it just felt like they needed to end the movie. So they're like, let's just get this knocked out,
I was so into it, because you're right. You're playing the game, but you're also trying to guess if the game is still going on at certain points, or if it's not happening. And then, so I love that part. And then it just kind of ended, and I was like, oh, it was what happened?
Well,
Yeah.
and I think like that there is that last round specifically where they're switching back and you're just like, who switched back where? How did
Yeah.
it actually turn out? What was that last little move and who did it change things for or not? And yeah, you immediately get cut away from that. And I think what's interesting too about when we see his sister, Beatrice, right?
Hmm.
She You just said something I thought was key, Lamar, of he had such a horrible temper. He had such a horrible temper. Had been alluded to multiple times. When you see him with one black eye and picking another fight in
Road
traffic and all
rage.
these
Yeah.
things, did you feel like then you immediately knew? Not on second watch, on
No,
first
because I
watch, did you
think
feel like you knew?
No, because I also was going to point out I love the way when they do the flashback stories and it's sort of the still frames with them in the black and white and
Yeah.
they're
I
popping
loved
images. I
that.
thought that
Yep.
was great. So I don't think I was paying enough attention to Beatrice, like the actress, of seeing her face. So when she showed up, I was like, wait, what the fuck is this? And then as she gets to the grounds where the wedding is supposed to be, and you sort of see a fight, then I was like, okay, I see what's happening. But
Hmm.
I think the other kind of I don't know if it's a weak spot, but the reason the ending doesn't fully hit at a 10 is none of the characters are particularly likable, especially Shelby, who I feel like at the beginning we're supposed to sympathize with, but over the course of the film you're seeing that really her tragic backstory is just jealousy, right? Like envy. And so when she ends up being kind of an asshole too, that last monologue where she's, yelling at Cyrus in prison or whatever, it doesn't hit because you're like, well, I don't really like you as much anymore. That was the other kind of weak spot for me. But
I think it makes her kind of interesting though. Like she was early on, she was really one dimensional for me. Yes, you felt bad for her, but she was kind of this generic long suffering girlfriend
mhm.
of like, I'm with this douchebag and I'm just tolerated this douchebag forever who treats me bad and doesn't touch me or like me or any of these things. And then you get this whole Nikki backstory that complicates matters and she has all these suspicions about it, but it's almost like she's struggling to actually do anything about it or really face the music. And this is apparently 9 years, right? Like you just feel bad for her, but there's nothing else about her, right? Like you never get any introduction to like, what is her passion? What is her personality? What is the thing that she's bringing to the table that is different or special or whatever? She's just making fun of Nikki. And so I think that that's actually, it really follows for me that she actually has this undercurrent of also being shitty, right? Like she is also just a shitty person just as much as Cyrus. And in that sense, are they together for that reason that they're really of the same ilk, it seems like to me. And then I think this whole game just gives her the freedom to let that out, to
Yeah,
to just be herself.
I agree. I feel like the point of the game for me, or the thing I liked the most, was like underneath it all, there was no hero in that movie. There was no
Mm-hmm.
savior. Everyone was flawed, and they realized everyone else is flawed. But you know what I mean. But they still
Yeah.
wanted their own. Like it was just, I don't know. I love the whole convention of it. That was great.
And I
Yeah.
thought it was interesting. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, no, I was just going to say to Neil's earlier point of maybe for me, it's not so much that speech doesn't land because I get what you're saying, Mackenzie, of like, yeah, she is a
Right.
flawed character. Like maybe it is okay that she's also an asshole at the end of the day. But I think because that's the last scene of the film, to Neil's point, like maybe if we had had a little
Yeah,
more
the
of
way
attack
that it
on it,
ends.
like it's like,
Yeah.
oh, that's the finale is just this girl who we don't particularly
Yeah.
like giving this speech. I don't know.
It feels abrupt. I
Yeah.
totally agree. I feel
Yeah.
like the ending is like boom. You're like, and it's actually, I think, a sign of a great film that you wanted there to be
Yeah,
more.
exactly. I mean, yeah, of
Like
Yes.
course. Yeah.
I wanted more from it. I was still interested. Like, what else is going to happen? And you kind of get cut off from where is this really going? But one of the other things I wanted to say too is I feel like this film conveys more than others. And actually, I would say this of Kneecap a little bit too. But while I was watching it, I was so aware of sensations, and I feel like that's hard to explain, but the way that it's shot and the things that they're doing and the slicing of the different colors, like you said, I feel like it gives you a whole other layer to what they are physically feeling, tasting, doing, experiencing in a way that I think is really hard to convey. And it was a really interesting aspect of me. I made it the note multiple times of like all of the sensation of this experience is really coming through.
Yeah, I think I was gonna save this for when we talk about the other films, but at one point I think I was on Kneecap, like the third of the bunch that I was watching, and my thought was like, were we just all trying to like out trip each other? Like just like these trippy visuals and like the drugs involved and the experiences, like you're talking about sensations. Like I think it was very deliberate of them, what Neil said about low budget, to have this in sort of this mansion with just all these random art installations.
Yeah.
Such a smart fucking move.
And just like
Yeah.
one location. That's why I feel like
Mhm.
they wrapped up the scenes after, because I think it was just a money thing. Like they didn't have
Yeah.
money to do like 30 locations. They did literally one main location, then one or two scenes in other locations. So
I liked the aesthetic of the place, like you said, all these like art installations. And I remember when we first saw, because I knew there was something weird to this movie, right? And like something odd is going on, but I didn't yet know. And we see the trauma sign. And like in my notes, I'm like, so wait, everybody sees the trauma sign, right? This isn't like a for the audience only of like, there is trauma here alert. Cause I was like, I didn't know how much of this was going to be those overlaid shots of background and all of that yet. But I was like, we all see the trauma sign, right? And I was like, so everyone here, are we all processing trauma? Are we trying to see something here in advance? And then it just got weird. And I was like, oh no, we're not. We're just terrible people.
I'm
Is what
sure there's
we've learned.
a college student right now writing a thesis on how all the art installations in this, because you have the
Yeah.
Hall of Mirrors thing. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, all
Oh my
this, you
God.
could probably do 500 pages on this shit. The last thing that I kind of wanted to wrap this with on it's what's inside, and obviously if you guys have anything else to add, but the last thought I had was just it validates the thought that we're all already aware of no matter what the fucking technology is, it's going to get used for sex. Eventually, everything will be used for sex, because it's like these guys are in each other's bodies for 6 minutes, and it's like I want to fuck that person now in this person's
Yeah.
body.
well, I don't. Yeah, I mean, sex I think was like the outer expression of that. For me, it was just about if you're telling a lie, the truth will always come out. You know, when
Yeah.
you get it, when
Yep.
you are not paying attention, or when you're not in control of what's going on. I think that's what happened when they get being in other people's bodies gave them permission to be who they wanted to be and say what they wanted to say and follow their impulses, whether they were correct or not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it also gave them like this high. It's funny that y'all said that we each have these films that have these like out trip each other moments, and I didn't really register that until now. But this does feel like a trip for a lot of it, right? Like they swap bodies, and they, to your point, it releases these inhibitions. You don't have them anymore. You just do whatever you want, and it comes off as like a high throughout the film. And I thought that was such an interesting way to interpret what this would do to you, that you would go into this state of kind of no fear, unfiltered, letting these things out. And we see, interestingly enough, the one with the most to hide, Cyrus, is the most uncomfortable with
Yeah.
this process the whole
And
time.
they get the more they do it, the more addicted they get to doing it.
Yeah.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really interesting. Well, I think this is a really good pick, Lemar. I think it was not what I expected.
It was great.
I will totally agree.
I'd
Yeah.
seen like a TikTok on it. It's like, you got to watch this movie. It's a horror movie made by when they talk really fast, you know. That's
Yeah.
And I was like, oh god, this seems overwhelming. But
You're like,
now
I've
that I
been
watched
assaulted.
the movie,
No, thank you.
I was like, they did the marketing didn't do this movie justice, I don't think.
No,
I feel like
yeah.
this would be like a good back-to-back like double feature with Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. I feel like
Yeah.
we're in this wave of like Gen Z, not horror really, but like what
Mhm.
Gen Z likes to watch of like, and I think that those two do a great job of tying in the contemporary social media and the contemporary where everybody's always plugged in, everybody's always turned on. So I think this is like adding to that list.
There's your undergrad thesis paper right there. You know, let's go write it. I'll write it later. Don't worry. I'll let you know.
I think I'm gonna take some of that mushroom tea from my old ass and give this one a third watch, because now I'm really curious.
I mean, I'm super curious about that specific tea. Like this does some shit. Well, we'll not jump the gun on that one. I think that was a great film. Thank you for suggesting that, Lemar. Let's talk about another great one, Kneecap. I had a fucking great time watching this movie. I just want to start with that. When you suggested it, Neal, I was like, I watched the trailer immediately, and I was like, I gotta wait. I want to watch it closer to the ep. Like, It was so good.
It was well. I'm curious, Neal. Since I sort of kicked off what drew you to this film? Because I hadn't heard of this until you mentioned it. Like, how did you find out about it? How did you end up seeing it? And what attachment did you have to
I
it?
found out about it because I just watched so many movies, and then every now and then AMC will be like do like a special, screening of something, and that's where this movie came up. But the reason why I chose it, I mean, is it the best movie made last year? I don't know how anyone judges that. Why was it my favorite movie? Because I do appreciate movies that are honest. And I feel like these guys, these three dudes, made this movie because they just wanted to make this movie and tell this story, and they wanted to tell it their way. And it didn't feel it was a great production. The production value was incredible, but it
Right.
didn't feel like it didn't feel like people are like Wicked's such a good movie. It's not. To me, it's not. I just feel like there's not an honesty there. There's something so curated about Wicked, where every moment you're supposed to feel this, and like it's so particular. But this movie just felt very raw and honest, and they told a story that I knew nothing about. I didn't know anything about. When people said Irish language, I thought it was like English with an Irish accent. I had
Same.
no idea there was there's a whole indigenous language of Ireland, and that the English are trying to basically erase it and erase these people's culture and history and who they are. And this is a lot of the impetus for the political situation down there. And so I just found it so fascinating that you're immediately taken into this world, and it's a world I knew nothing about, but I was in it. I don't drink, I don't do drugs, but I was like rooting for these dudes, cheering for them. And I wish that more people had seen this movie because it's just fun, and it's fun in an honest way, and there's no pretense about it. And I think one of the reasons they didn't get Oscar nominated because they're super political, and they're
very political,
very out there, and that's who they are in the movies, who they are in real life. And there was no, like, they play characters obviously, but I don't know. For me, when you see a movie that's made with such a love and passion and honesty, it doesn't matter if it falls short in some of the other areas, or if it's not as perfect. I think those are the things that make movies exciting to me. And I just know that at the end of the day, there wasn't a studio exec being like, you guys should take out this because audiences aren't going to get it. They just made this movie. They have a drug scene that's off the rails. Like, it's insane, but it's so good, and it adds to the story, and it adds to the layering. And like you said, Mackenzie, with how it's shot, like they change the pacing and they change the sound, and like you're in this world and you're just gripped by it. It's great.
Yeah. I totally agree. Lemar, what did you think?
I think if you had told me, because I knew very little about this, I think when Neal sent us the title, I kind of looked at the little one paragraph summary, and it didn't specifically tell me that it was sort of a biopic essentially. So I wasn't aware that it was a real music group, and they were basically playing themselves or fictionalized versions of themselves. And I think that would have given me pause if I had known all that, because I think you would say, well, obviously it's three guys in their 20s, 30s making a movie about them changing the world and them being in this music group. It's risky, right? Of like, you could look back at friggin' like Straight Outta Compton, or like the Elvis movie, where it's like they're idealizing people and cutting out some of the rough around the edges stuff. And that's not even NWA making a movie about themselves. In this case, they do a good job of making it feels like you said, Neal, like you're dropped into the middle of a real life situation, and it's not something necessarily that we as Americans can relate to, because we haven't had this sort of experience of a culture being ripped out from underneath you and trying to find your identity when you're, literally your fathers and mothers were dying and killing for their freedoms, right? And now that you're sort of inheriting this trauma. But that whole speech in there about them trying to find their identity, and it's like them getting shit on by their ancestors because they don't have blood on their hands, basically. I don't know. It's hard I'm going on and on because this movie it has a lot happening, and it just, to your point, it was just, I was in it for 90 minutes or whatever it was, and I never hesitated. I think the visuals are incredible. I would have liked a little more, honestly, because I think that the first time the lyrics pop up on the screen and they're rapping and they're seeing the animations, I went, oh shit, this is going to be, and then it kind of runs that back a few times, and some of the drug trips are really cool, but I feel like they could have gone like one step further with like a little more animation or stylization. We do have the claymation scene later, and there's like the robot or talking head like stop motion thing. But I feel I was like, I needed like one more cool visual thing, but they do some really creative stuff here.
Yeah, I just, yeah, it reminded me of Train Spotting the first time I saw it. Like that kind of like urgency in the whole movie, and I couldn't get over how much I loved it and how much at the core of it, there's heart. Like there's a father son story there, there's a mother son story there. There's a lot of these things that ground the movie in reality, and like I was saying about the honesty, that's why like when you make an honest movie, you can have heart. Even though you're doing all this crazy stuff, like that's way out there. Even like the drug trip scene where he goes on the bus and everyone's got the same like,
public transportation.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Ugh. Yeah, I thought it was so. I think authentic is absolutely one of the main things that comes to mind here, because it does feel so genuine. I do like that it's subtle, that they are playing themselves. I also love, like, even if you just watch the credits, but I did look a little bit up later of like they were helped produce this, and this felt very much like their story in a really authentic way, and in a way that could be, it's very raw, right? And so it could be very poorly received, right? Like these are people who are giving you the keys to this kingdom that is not all, sunshine and rainbows. It's fucking drug trips and politics and trauma and intergenerational PTSD over the state of your country and your language and your culture. Like it's
Police
heavy
brutality,
shit. Police brutality,
government
yeah.
overstep. Yeah.
All of it. And it could be really, again, really poorly received. And I think it says a lot about how much this resonates with people, not again in the same way for us as Americans potentially, but like a disconnect from your culture, I think can be a common theme for a lot of people. And so it resonates and it comes through, even though the subject matter is really raw and really intense. And I think it added a layer for me that I did know about the Irish language stuff. And Lamar knows I'm a nerd. So I have gone down this rabbit hole before. And I actually have a cousin who lives in Ireland, but Republic Ireland. And so there is such an interesting dynamic between those communities and the way that they relate to the British. And to see that manifest in every single relationship in this story, from the girl that he likes to his mom, to the cops, to the orange group on the road, like it permeates their consciousness every single day. And it is not at all a surprise that it's reflected in their art, their rapping, and then that they're coming back to tell this story. I thought it was really interesting insight into this community and into them and how they did this.
Yeah, and I didn't know it was a biopic either until afterwards when I was like looking up the group. But I do think this movie does something that I think a lot of music biopics don't do. They integrate music into the movie seamlessly, where you don't even notice it's just a part of the movie.
Yeah,
it's not a separate entity. It's flowing from scene to scene, and even when they're creating the songs, it doesn't feel like this is a scene where we're making a song. It just feels like this is a scene where they're hanging out and music comes out of it. It's just great.
Yeah. It's like,
it feels organic. Like this is when and where this music would happen. It's not, we're going to bust into song right now.
Or we're going to go into a studio and make this, like, it's so, I don't know. It's just not the way because do I know if they didn't have the subtitles for I would not know what they're rapping about.
Fuck no. It's great. But I was like, I kept pausing actually, because the lyrics are so interesting.
Good.
I don't know if y'all did this, but I don't know if the lyrics are so interesting and profound and well written. Like they are incredible writers. And I think in general, hip hop can kind of get a bad rap for that, where the people just ignore what is being said. And in a lot of situations, it is poetry. And these people are writing poetry. And so I just kept wanting to pause and like read the words. 'Cause I was like, this is so interesting and it's so well written. It's beautifully written stuff. And also like just the music itself. It's so incredibly performed.
And shout out to the three main dudes that are in the group, because I don't know how much acting experience they had, but they're in scenes with Michael Fassbender, and they are holding their own.
You can't tell.
Yeah, it's great. It's really hard to play yourself. It's really hard to play yourself believably. It's really hard to like be with actors in that caliber and not stick out when you're that young and green. So what they did, I thought, was insane.
It seemed so seamless. Like they were just, it's almost like somebody just put a camera on their day, on their life, and they didn't give a fuck. And
it was like all the footage during the credits just looks like part of the movie because it's shot so authentically. Yeah. I was gonna say that I think this being them again playing themselves, there that risk I think it's taken out because it's clear that they care about what the actual message of the film is. They throw that text at the end about the what's the word they use, like extinction of different indigenous languages. So they're not making this movie to brag about how they're these cool
every 40
hip-hop
days
artists.
an indigenous language is erased.
So it's like they're not doing this film to like show off how awesome they are, or even the role that they played in this story of like, look, we saved this language. They're doing it because they want to save other languages, right? Like, and they want this identity for their people. So I think that without that, it might have been a little more disingenuous, but I think because it has that sincerity about it, like it plays really well.
Yeah, and I think what this movie does well is another movie, Better Man, does well too, where if you didn't tell me Better Man was about Robbie Williams, I would have watched it and be like, this is a good movie, because I still don't know anything about Robbie Williams, but I do know the emotions he went through in his life. And that's why I like this movie too, because it wasn't about this band at all. It was about what they stood for. And so you didn't have to care about the band or the music. You just had to care about what they cared about. And I thought that's how they got around this being a music biopic or a biopic without us caring about the band that was there.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting to your point though, Lemar, is that it's interesting that that's how we all kind of felt about it. And that's really our interpretation of it. I think we can all say that we agree on that, but it's funny. I was reading a little bit about it, and there are people who think the exact opposite. They think this is posturing. They think that this is attention grabbing on the part of the band. They think that they don't actually feel this way, that this is a persona they have built, this hood persona, that it's not about the Irish language. It's about them getting attention and making record sales and things like that. And it's so interesting to me that that's the take of literally anyone, you know what I mean? Because you're like, it feels like it could not be further from the truth. And that is how somebody feels about it. And I think it speaks so much to the inherent divisiveness of this community and the way people feel about this language, that somebody out there feels that way, genuinely feels that this is bullshit. And why can't you just shut up and speak the Queen's English, as it were, as they say in the film? And I think it shows that it's somebody's going to find a way to dismiss that if they disagree with your point of view, no matter how authentically you're coming through telling your story. And I thought that was a crazy interpretation, but it's there, it's out there. People feel that way.
And I think a lot of people are also drawing on the fact that they are super pro-Palestine. Like, they are, and they're not apologetic about it at all.
Yeah. They wouldn't sell the rights to allow it to screen in Israel, for context, for those who don't know. So they're very pro-Palestine.
Yeah. And because of that, they've received a lot of backlash. But I think if they were doing it for posturing and they would
let it be sold there. Yeah. They clearly are principled people. Whether you agree
that was the
with their
case, they would have
principles or
made a better Oscar run and left all the politics out of it, you know, and just campaigned on the movie alone, and that would have been enough. But they refused to kowtow to anyone.
And I think what's really, I mean, there's so many really interesting things about this, but I think it is one that could have succeeded at the Oscars from, I mean, the audience level, right? Like if the audiences are exposed to it, I think it could have really succeeded and won. It was the first Irish film at Sundance, which is a feat in and of itself. But I think, exactly to your point of like, that is not the point of this story to them. It doesn't feel like the point of the story to them. And I think even the way that they, like, the animations are and all those pieces, like, speak to, we just want to tell the story our way. This is a very different way to tell the story. And it matters to us, and we're going to present it this way.
Yeah. And I think, you know, all the awards won, all the people that love it, they really love it. And I think that's what matters the most. Like, wherever they've gotten a chance to play, they've done well, and they've crushed it. I don't think they care about the Oscars as much as they care. I mean, all the other festivals they've gotten into, all the love they received, that's what matters in the end.
Maybe they could have won over the Academy if they had thrown free drugs.
They won a couple they could. Oh yeah, they could. They had gone to the Oscars luncheon, you know.
They throw drugs. I don't want to ruin the movie for everyone.
So many drugs.
Dude, when they do the performance on ketamine accidentally, and they're playing with sort of like the angles of it and leaning off balance.
It's like a Jamiroquai video. They're all
yes.
I think what's so interesting about that scene actually is I remember saying out loud, "Okay, but what is the audience seeing?" Right? Because you feel like you're so restricted, and it's a very interesting choice. You're so restricted to their trip, right? Their lens of this experience. And it probably speaks to that if this happened or something similar happened in real life, right? They don't have another perspective to show. They don't know what they actually looked like, right? But the whole time as an audience member, you're, at least for me, I was like aching to see, what does this actually look like?
If the mics were even plugged in, what's going on?
Right. Like, what was this performance like that you were tripping on? And I love that it's a recurring theme that he swaps it. It's a silly little thing, but I think it's so funny at the end. You know, they're holding hands, which is also adorable. And he's like, you switch the ketamine and the coke again, right? And it's just like, it just speaks to this little, like, I don't know, misfit family that you wouldn't have expected to come together and create this thing. And they have in this really interesting, fascinating way that, again, makes you want more. I think that's the other thing, is I definitely did want more of this story, you know? I think also too, we see I think the police commissioner lady, I can't remember her name right now, but she is a very necessary and important foil to them that I think is used really well. And she is at her worst at a point that is surprising, I think, to the viewer by and large, but feels like it makes sense to the heightened tension of this time and this story and things like that. But you see how far people are willing to go. You know, she bombs the garage, she beats the shit out of him, she does all these things. And it, again, I think it just adds to this undercurrent of, this is, the tension here is unfathomable to you, the outsider, to understand that this is where this can go. And even though you hate her, I think she does a really good job of being the center of that conflict for them.
Yeah. I think all of those, the characters that come in and out of their lives, whether it's the mom, the dad, the girlfriend, the detective, or even DJ Provy, his girlfriend, I assume. But the way she's interweaved into the story is really cool. If she's sort of taking the more politically correct approach to trying to solve this problem, while he's going sort of the underground route.
They want the same things but different tactics.
And I liked that the story sort of ended with them going their separate ways. Like, I thought that was a really interesting way to play it out, of, hey, we align on principle, but not in the way that we're getting there, I guess, maybe. So I thought every side character, and even I didn't initially love the British girlfriend storyline. It felt a little shoehorned, but to your point, that's how it ties into the detective, and that gives her this additional reason to be like, now you're stepping across bounds with this person who Personal I care about, my blood. Yes. So that is why she ultimately goes over the edge.
I can tolerate you existing in my world because you have to, but I can't tolerate you invading my personal world. Like, that's not acceptable. It's, what does she say about green and orange makes brown and nobody likes brown?
Some people like brown.
And she's like, some people like brown. I fucking like brown, you know? And I was like, motherfucker. So we love brown. Okay. But yeah, no, I think that's such a good call out of how they all contribute to the story. I think also Michael Fassbender's character is really interesting as well, because again, he has gone to the extreme for his belief system as well. And you see how it does damage to the people in his life who support his cause. They believe in what he believes, but they're the collateral damage. And it makes it really hard to separate the cause from the person, I think. And you see that over and over in this film. And I think they do that really subtly, but really, really well.
Yeah. You mentioning him just made me think of that awesome overhead shot of the car driving onto the beach. Like, that just feels, and not that it feels out of place, but of all the shot, I liked that one a lot. I liked the two phone booths next to each other and sort of the panning back and forth of the red and the yellow. Like, there's a lot of creative stuff. For as much as I said, I wanted a little more over the top in this, those really pretty just cinema shots are great too.
I also liked the animations, the way that they were done as well. I do think you maybe could have done more, but I also thought it complemented it really well. I liked the way that where they chose to do it. It was subtle sometimes. You're like, oh, did I just see that? You know, clicks a button on the board, right? And you see a little flicker. It almost makes you like appreciate it more, I think. So for me, I thought it was very well done how they added that in. And yeah, I agree. I think that was a great shot. I think this is a very well shot film. Like we said, I loved the shots inside of the balaclava. And I liked the what was the other really the coke up the nose from inside the nose shot.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, Both of
That
those
whole
were
that whole
really
sequence
incredible.
where they're just tripping all night and doing all the drugs. And I mean, Neil, you mentioned Train Spotting. I don't. Was that a deliberate reference when he climbs into
Yeah.
the trash bin and his legs disappear
And
and
he
then he
falls
pops
Oh,
out
out.
at
I
the
didn't
end?
Yeah.
even, I mean, I
That's how I
maybe
read
it was.
it. Like,
Yeah. I just thought it was a really, it was such a wild thing.
Yeah.
That whole-
Yeah. I thought it was really well done. I mean, thanks for the recommendation. I saw
Yeah.
again, as soon as I saw the trailer, I was like, hell yeah. But I had heard something very briefly, and I think it was like a preview at a screening or something.
I think
And
it's
then it
like a
wasn't
lot
really
like
showing
Lamar's
anywhere.
movies. Like this year wasn't the year for indie films to get a lot
No.
of press because
To break
Wicked
through.
sucked a lot of air out of everything, and Gladiator. And I'm just saying, there's a lot of big.
Gladiator 2 was terrible. It was
Yeah.
the worst thing.
Didn't bother.
Anyway,
The
I
one
hated
thing
it.
that we didn't say throughout all of this, because we're talking about sort of the meaning behind this film and the message and how the dramatic moments land. The only thing that I want to mention is it's fucking funny. Like, it's
Yeah.
really funny.
Really
Just
funny.
laugh out loud. I love when they fast forward the scene where they get their asses kicked. That made me chuckle. And I love at the end when DJ Provi tries to have that heroic moment, and he's like, and now he did something utterly fucking pointless.
Yeah,
He just gets beat up by the cops.
exactly.
No.
Very
You're
funny.
like amped. You're like cheering him on. You're like ready to go. And then you're like, this is how you know this story is a real life story. This fucker gets his ass beat and it's just pointless. Yeah.
There isn't a scene in the movie where they kick anyone's ass. They're always getting their ass
No.
beat, and it's
Yes.
it's hilarious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that they fast forward. They're like, we're just gonna fast forward to the part where we get our ass beat. And but I love that concept of sometimes you have to pick a fight even when you know you're not gonna win.
Yeah.
You know, and these feel like the guys who are gonna do that. Like, yeah, I know I'm gonna get my ass beat, but I'm not gonna like not say the thing, do the thing, you know?
Yeah.
So I don't know. They're pretty they're anarchists in the best way, I feel like. Awesome. Well, guys, like we said, go see it. This is a good one. It's on Netflix actually, so you can stream it. Easy
so
peasy.
is
Go check it out.
Lamar's movie. It's what's
Mhm.
inside
Yeah,
the
they're
Breath
both on Netflix. My old ass is on Prime, so you can also stream it if you have Prime, I guess, or you can rent it or what have you. And I do want to explain why I picked this one a little bit. So I same thing. I wouldn't say this is even. I don't know that this is my favorite film of 2024. I would have maybe wanted to talk about The Substance or a couple other interesting ones if we hadn't already talked about them on the pod. So I had a lot of factors here of like, I wanted to balance you guys' choices that you had selected. I didn't want us to all be kind of in the same vein. And it's interesting that they have the thread that they do.
That's really
Yeah, but also I remember seeing this and being so surprised by it actually. And not that I didn't think it would be good. I just was so surprised at what it brought out in me and how much I loved it. And this was the same thing as you, Neil. I go to Alamo so often. I also get early screenings. So I wasn't like seeking this one out. It was, I got a free early screening and it was actually a live stream Q&A with the director and the two lead
that's cool.
actresses. So it was a very cool experience to hear their background. If you have researched the film at all, there's actually not a lot out there about it. It wasn't, a blockbuster film. There's not a lot of trivia you can find out. So I'm really grateful that I saw it the way that I saw it, because I feel like I learned a lot about how and why this film came about. And it just added to the experience for me. But just watching it in the theater, I was like, this is so fucking funny. To your point, Lemar, if there was nothing else good about this movie, I thought it was really funny, but also has these, of course, poignant, really tough moments and themes. But I think it's a by and large, the writing in this is so great, and it ends up being a really fun watch. So that's why I picked this one. So yeah, I'd love to hear what you guys thought of it.
Yeah, I saw this months ago when it came out in the theater. I didn't know anything about it. I just knew that it was the only movie playing at the time I wanted to go. And I'm
that.
glad, because if I'd watched the trailer, I would have been like, this movie's like Freaky Friday. I'm done. I'm done with the whole switching bodies thing, and then like it's lame. But then when you
except for it's
it,
what's inside.
Except for it's what's inside. So
that was a different dimension. But
right.
The whole like
yeah.
Matthew Perry had a video 17 again with Zac Efron. It's the same concept, where like your older self and younger self switch. And so I really love this movie because that could have been it. Over for this movie, but it was so well written, so genuine. Aubrey Plaza, and I don't know the other actress, they were so good. Maisie Stella, their chemistry is so good in this,
so good.
And it's about like it could be a shitty teen movie too, and it's not that at all. It's just such a well done movie. And I remember watching the theater being like, no one's gonna watch this movie, but everyone should watch it because it's just a story. There's no special effects. It's very simple, minimal, like just storytelling.
Story heavy. Just people living.
And it's and it takes place in wherever it was, Canada, where I can't remember where, but it was just great.
It's in Ontario, Canada, as far as the province, and the name of the town is like Moncaba, something like that.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Small town, beautiful, gorgeous.
Yeah, but it just could have been like a teen summer movie. You were like, but growing up in the summer,
teen angst movie.
Yeah, and it was just so different. I don't want to give too much away, but it was just really seamless how they integrated life lessons into that movie just through dialogue and not even talking about the lesson they were giving out, and it was just great. Really great.
I 100% agree with that. I'm really glad that you recommended this, Mackenzie, because I, like Neal, I saw, I think, trailers for it and was like, it's probably along those same lines of like, isn't it silly that we get old one day and look how different we are? Like, it felt like that's what it was going to be, and it's something completely different. So I would not have seen this, I think, or given it a chance. I also love, because I feel like Aubrey Plaza gets a lot of unfair flack because she gets typecast a lot, and she has a very specific cadence in the way that she speaks and type of character and comedy she brings to the table. This felt like a very, I don't know how the writer went about this, the writer director, if she created this one version of the character and then sort of did the cast, or if she started with the actress and then said, well, it doesn't feel like the younger actress is playing Aubrey Plaza. It feels the other way around, of giving Aubrey a chance to really like portray this character. And I love how they have the same like speech tics, and you pick up on it through the movie where they'll both say like, oh my God, like at the same time. And it's such a little thing, and they don't call a ton of attention to it, but it does feel like two, versions of the same character, which is, very intentional. But yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. I think ultimately what this movie is about is like, what do you do when you lose love in any sort of way, whether it's through a breakup, through grief, whatever. How do you deal with that loss of love? And would you change, is it better to loved and lost or never loved at all? That's like the premise of the movie to me.
I also really like that they go all in on the theme. We've already given a spoiler warning, so I don't feel as bad about it. But like,
it's in they drink the tea and they switch bodies. That's it's in the trailer.
Well, like,
she appears. Her future self appears to her on this fucking trip, and it's wild. Yeah.
I like the way they go about it, because I was slightly worried at the beginning. I was like, well, is this movie just going to be because I didn't see the trailer, or at least I didn't remember the trailer. So I was like, wait, is this just going to be a single trip? So it's going to be one night of them just talking to each other? I got a little worried. And then when it becomes the next day, I went, okay, now I'm curious where this goes. Does she just carry? And then they sort of find a way to stay involved in each other's lives. And I just like how that plays out. And like, again, spoiler warning here for like the ending. I was worried. I was very worried that they were going to have some kind of twist at the end when Chad could see the older version of the character. I was like, oh shit, they're going to have it be revealed that the 40-year-old version was the one that was tripping the whole time, and she's just going back to her past and reliving these memories and learning about why. And they didn't. They just said, no, this is actually happening. We're not going to explain the science of it. It's two people tripping balls, but meeting and interacting with each other in the real world.
And also, like, the idea of like drinking mushroom tea and that whole idea could have been very stupid if it wasn't done well, if it wasn't written well. It could have been so, like, I would be like, this is such an easy thing. Oh, you're gonna drink something and like you're gonna see your older self. It's like so lame when you think about it. But when you see it executed in the movie, you're like, oh man, this is really well done. It's really cute and clever and fun and smart.
And it feels really real. I think the thing about this script and also their performances that I just note throughout is, one, this is Maisie Stella's first major role, and she just lights up the screen, and she feels like Ray, right? Like, she just comes through as wholly authentically this person and this struggle, and also of a person around this time, right? In the age group she's supposed to be in and the time she's supposed to be representative of. She feels like a product of her time, and the way her and her friends interact is beautiful, and the way they trip is beautiful and look out for each other. And this the funniest aspects of the various trips. Like the Bieber trip later is fucking hysterical.
The second trip was
I
great.
love the role reversal there.
Yeah.
Is like so, and it's so Canadian too. Like that's the other thing, is like this is what these Canadian kids were dreaming about and doing. And that is so reflective too of like, to you guys' question about, I don't know how she started this film. Like she wrote this inspired by her upbringing and where she came from. She is Canadian actress and director. And so she wrote the story, and then she found the folks, or at least that's what she spoke to in the Q&A. And I think that comes through in the writing, because it's just like, here's my story, like here's this experience, but it has these really profound themes. I mean, there's some tough topics here, but I love the theme throughout of like, you don't remember the last time you do a thing, right? This formative, nostalgic thing, right? And Chad is actually, I think, one of the first, if not the first, to bring it up, right? He asks her, do you remember the last time you played pretend all day? And that is so, like, that almost alone got me, because that was just my favorite thing as a kid, to just go play pretend. And do you remember the last time you dropped your bike, you went inside, and you never did it again? And you don't. And that's a loss. Like that's something that you can mourn the loss of. And then her mom mourning the time that she's like, I'm never going to rock you again. I'm never going to have that experience of rocking my baby girl again. And really Elliot coming to face this, hey, I'm never going to be here again. I'm never going to be in this place. I'm never going to be with my family this way. I'm never going to be this age and having this moment in this life again. And I have to really savor it. And I think that's where her older self is like, you're so wise for being somebody so young. But she goes through this journey to get to that point of like, I need to feel all of this. I need to experience all of this because I need to remember this.
Yeah, there was I had heard when Chad gives that little monologue, I was like, that sounds so familiar. And I had to go, there was like a tweet going around in the last like decade or so of something similar that's like, one day you went out to play with your friends for the last time, but none of you knew it.
Yeah.
And that fun fact, that quote is now incorrectly attributed to The Sandlot, because we just covered The Sandlot last year. And I'm like, that's not said in that fucking movie, but there's all these like images and memes with the cast of The Sandlot and that quote. Not correct, internet. But
they're like, these are the kids you played with. That's what it is, you know?
Yes. So maybe it's symbolic. But yeah, that recurring lesson of experiencing something, losing that thing, but still appreciating it. It rings true of other sort of films of like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, where it's, we broke up, but the good times kind of make it worth, how the ending and the tragedy of how it ends or whatever. But yeah, this one was just, it was really, really heartfelt, and just, I feel like I've been overusing the word genuine throughout today's ep, but it just like, it feels honest, and it's just, it's very like touching, and it's not over the top. No one feels, I think another fear of mine is like, well, if they're going to put Aubrey Plaza, they're going to make it a point to have the comedy be this sort of really a way nobody speaks. It's going to feel unnatural and just like too clever for its own good. But this feels natural. It feels like real dialogue.
Yeah. I love how she calls out her younger self. That just initial scene in the tent, like just you're off and running of one, Aubrey's not going to be Aubrey Plaza, right? She's going to be a different person in this movie, which is great affirmation there. But two, their chemistry, I think, I think we've all said, like, their chemistry just comes through so well. Good. And I think it's so important of like, how would you interact with your younger self or your older self? Like, hopefully you would have a connection. And I just love that. Can we kiss? Like, what a weird, and I love, she's like, you need to be locked up. And I just feel like that's such an authentic response of like, why are you being weird? But what would you do in that situation? It's a crazy situation. And I love that they get to a point of accepting it. And really, I love that ultimately she is trusting herself both ways, right? The younger person is trusting the older person to be this older and wiser person who, yes, has the benefit of hindsight, but just it's her, right? If I can't trust anybody's gut, I can trust mine, right? Let me lean on this person. And vice versa. When we see older Elliot decide to listen to her and say, yeah, love Chad, do it. This is the best thing in the fucking world for you. And that moment of her trusting her, like this pain is worth it. And you do have to live your life and trust, and you have to ultimately be yourself, trust yourself, and live your life the way that you want. I think that's such a great message of why they are so connected from the beginning, and it really follows through it all the way to the end.
It was interesting. They both taught each other the same lesson, but they just did it through different means, but it was exactly the
I
same
did
lesson.
find it to be like a little, not like hypocritical, but when she's telling her, hey, you spend more time with your family, like hang out with your brother, like really value all these things, because one day it's not going to be as frequent. But then for her to turn around and have that sort of alternate view about Chad, but then her having to convince herself essentially like, no, this is right, I'm going to live this, I want to experience these positive things. And also, I mean, fun thing out there, I feel like Chads have had a rough go of it the last few years with just nomenclature.
We got one good Chad. We got one good Chad.
This movie does more to redeem
It's really
Chads.
funny because when she said "Beware of Chad," I thought he was going to be a villain in this movie. So the whole time, I'm waiting. I'm waiting for him to do something horrific. I'm like, Chad's gonna fucking do something shitty because he's fucking Chad.
Chad is like a 6-year senior at this point, just waiting for her in Toronto. That's where my mind went.
Yeah.
But you hear the name, and you're immediately like, checks out. He's going to be terrible. And I think
even the way she said it, she's like, "Stay away from Chad." I'm like,
Chad,
something terrible. Chad did something awful. I know it.
And if you think about her whole life, and she's giving Elliot the keys to the kingdom, right? Of like what to do and not do, and the first thing that comes to mind is this asshole Chad. You're like, okay, it can only be terrible, and it can only be that he is terrible. And I do think that that's an interesting difference between a first watch and a second watch. And I thought maybe the second watch wouldn't be as interesting for that reason, because in the first watch you're the whole time waiting for him to do something douchey. You're like, why is he terrible? You're having, I think what's really cool, the same experience as Elliot, right? You're like trying to figure out why you're not supposed to be around this person who seems like such a sweetheart, and then you figure out why, obviously. And I think on the second watch it's actually just as interesting, because you kind of know what's coming, but you can see her experience on both sides. And I think to your point, Lemar, of why would she is a little bit hypocritical for a hot minute there of like, live your life, but also not this part. And I think if you could avoid the most painful moment in your whole life and you actually had the choice to do it, would you? Like, you would at least consider it, is what I'm saying. Like, and it can feel hypocritical in the moment, but I think you would go through that roller coaster of, if I don't have to feel this pain, this most horrible pain I've ever felt, and I can avoid it and preserve that part of my heart, like, would I? And I think certainly people can relate to being tempted by that, at least.
Yeah, it would have been fucked up if it was like a plot twist at the end where she decides she's not going to date Chad, but she ends up dating a Kyle instead. And then her older self is just like, damn it.
Fucking Kyle. Fucking Kyle.
Speaking of names, let's keep this train going. It made me laugh earlier because you referred to Elliot as Ray. And I love that running joke because it's set up so innocently of like, she says, my name's Ramona.
Ray Romano.
And he goes, okay, Ray Romano. And that was such a good throwaway joke in the moment, but then they come back to it like 3 times. And I love that running gag. Yeah.
I love that she throws the phone. She texts herself. And then she confirms it back by saying, stay away, Ray Romano, or whatever. Yeah. And she's like, and throws it. And I just love that reaction because, like, it's the stupidest thing to do in that moment. But you're also like, that feels kind of real. It feels like maybe you would freak out and throw the phone.
It's really funny. It was a really funny movie.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, it was a good time. Well, thanks for watching it. I do think it was one of those unexpected ones. And I've been recommending it to people because I'm like, it's not what you think it is. But I think that's a common theme here. It's funny that we're like talking about all these big movies and these Oscar wins and comparing some of these stories. And I think what's interesting is that the things that stood out to us that each of us wanted to talk about were things that felt really authentic or unique or real or, interesting and unexpected a little bit in all these various ways. I think there's just very common themes here, even though these are very different movies.
Yeah.
So I think that's really interesting. Cool. Well, thanks for playing, guys. That was a great time. And also, I want to shout us out here at We Drink and We Watch Things. We're the most long-winded pod in history, and I think we kept those to a pretty close to a tight 20. I'm really proud of us, actually. Yeah. All right. Well, let's get to the fun stuff. So, it's all been fun, but we got the pleasure of seeing your short film, Barely Breathing. And I've seen it twice now because I watched it immediately that night that you sent it to me. And
It's
then
only 20
I
minutes
watched
long too.
You're right. It was 20 minutes long, and I was
Watch
like,
it.
let's fucking go.
Yeah.
But I had the best time. I got like a little blanket. I went on my patio. It casted it was a great time. And so I wanted to do it again. And then Lamar saw it recently. And so we have been thinking about it, talking about it, all the things. And we have lots of questions for you, both about the film and about you and all your things. So strap in.
Strapped.
So yeah, strapped. Lamar, I'll let you kick us off. You had a great opening question. So take it away.
Yeah, Neal, what is your favorite color? I don't remember what my first question was, but I'll take a guess at what I think it was. Go ahead.
It's gonna be pink or lavender, like what I'm
I
wearing.
love the salmon-y
Excellent
pink, you
choice.
guys.
Yeah.
This checks out. This checks out.
But my real first question, that was a great start. We're off.
I was going to say
we're
I
off
can
the
give you a
middle.
cheat sheet to your
Well,
questions.
I think what I
if
was
you
going to
want.
start with before we get to barely breathing, which I think short film is so underappreciated because one of my biggest complaints on this pod is movies that run way too long. Where it's like for the story you were telling, we didn't need 2 hours and 40 minutes. Fucking Martin Scorsese. Like we do not need for the story that you're doing. Like we didn't need this extra 30 minutes of film.
Yeah.
And this one, just the amount that you can fit into 20 minutes of riding different emotional roller coasters and like reveals and things like that, and the laughs, like you can just do so much in 20 minutes. But before we get to that one, just how did you get your start in film? Like when did you know that you wanted to be a writer or actor? And just walk us through how you got here.
It was later in life for sure. I was just a dude. I used to do design, marketing, all that kind of stuff. I had my own company, and then I started stand up. But stand up was more just like a hobby. And this is when I had like super long hair and a long beard. And I guess randomly I would get asked to be background because they needed a guy that looked like a terrorist to be in the background. Or they just needed a guy with long hair and a long beard. They just need that look to be in the background. So I would do like random extra work, which is not really film related. It's actually terrible.
You were on a set. We're very happy
you
for
at
you.
least?
Yeah, they feed you, but they put you in a little holding. It's a whole thing.
Yeah.
It's I don't recommend it to anyone. It's grueling. You're there all day, and you're like the lowest of the totem pole. But yeah, and then I started doing stand up, and then I just would write on my own a lot. And then after Queer Eye, I just remember talking to my mom, and she knew that I wanted to do other things, and she was like, if you want to do this stuff, like now do it. What are you waiting for? And so
now's the time.
Yeah, and I had, I tried to be, I just wasn't taking it seriously, and so I took it seriously. I started writing every night and started taking acting classes and started doing all the things to try to. I felt like I had some momentum, and I felt like I had a story to tell, and I felt like I could do a good job telling it. I started late. I started late in life, but it was always in my mind. I just didn't have the balls, quote unquote, to do it.
So how long ago was that you said? I'm not familiar with the Queer Eyes stuff, but I guess two-parter. Like how did that opportunity come to pass? But then how long ago, when you say I started late, was this 3 years ago, 5 years ago that you started actually this writing process?
The writing process, I started really writing just about 6 years ago. Okay. So that's kind of when it all started. That's and how did Queer Eye come about? Is that I was they found me randomly. I didn't apply to be on the show. I was they came across me somehow. They asked me to be on the show. I didn't want to be on the show. I'd been doing stand up. I think that's one of the reasons they knew a guy doing stand up in town. One of the producers just happened to be at a bar I was doing stand up at, and we became friends. It took them a long time to convince me to be on the show because I'm so private. I just didn't want to do it. And, on the show, you don't hear about me doing stand up because they already had a stand up episode, I guess. And so they just focused on what I did for work, my real work, which was that app at the time I was developing. So it wasn't like disingenuous. It was honest. They just couldn't have two guys that were trying to stand up. And plus, stand up wasn't it was just a thing I did. It wasn't like
it was like a hobby, not your career at that point.
Yeah, I'm not gonna. I couldn't be. You can't make any money,
right?
When you're at my level at that time, it's impossible. And so and so after that, I met people, through stand up that were actors, and I just wanted to be in that world. And I just, even when I was a kid, I liked acting.
Mm-hmm.
I just never did it, but except for when I was like in elementary school, and then in college, I was randomly in a play, but because I
Yeah.
walked by and did like a walk-in audition. I didn't even have a monologue prepared. They just had to give me a book to read from. And then in the play, the guy was like, "We don't really have a role for you because we have to give it to like people who are actors." But it was like an old radio show they turned into a theater play, and then they let me do the sound effects. So I was like the Foley guy on stage. 'Cause that's what they used to have at the old radio booth. So it was
Yeah,
a guy doing
yeah.
I was like on stage
100%.
live doing all the sound effects. That was like the whole setup of the play. It was me and a radio announcer narrating like the action that was going on.
Cool.
And so it was cool. That was like my first
Yeah.
foray into theater, and then that was it for a long time because I was just a dude. And so
I love theater. I was a theater kid. There's
Okay.
there's nothing like live theater production, man. It's such an energy.
Yeah, and then
Do you
with
feel like? Go
Go
ahead.
ahead. I was gonna say
I was
with
just
right.
curious. Do you feel like with Queer Eye that specifically that experience inspired you to like take a leap of faith, or was
Absolutely.
it like
I mean,
the way that you interacted with them, or what was it?
Yeah, I think it made me realize that so many things in my life could be better if I just took effort and put effort into
Right.
things. And I really, I was for the longest time stuck with my head pointed in one direction, and it didn't turn me 180 degrees. It just shifted me about 5 degrees to the left, and I saw things that I had never seen before because I had such blinders on. And so,
Yeah.
of course, I think anything that breaks in life that breaks you out of these cycles that we're in day in and day out is always a good thing. Even if it's someone that comes in your life and they do some damage sometimes. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's just good to be broken out of what you think, just so you can kind of
Mhm.
see what else is out there.
Yeah.
And that's what Queer Eye was for me. It was like, it was transformative in a lot of ways in the moment, but long term, it gave me permission to try again, which I kind of given up on trying. I was just cool with the status quo for a long time.
I feel like this episode is giving out so much incredible life advice
I
between
know.
Neal's story and my old ass. Like, we're just getting, and also don't trade bodies with your friends.
Yeah.
It's just
Right.
great advice today.
This
Do
is a
drugs.
self-help pod. Did you know?
Do
Like
drugs.
this
Do
is
ketamine, yeah.
do drugs. Trust your gut. New experiences.
Defend
new angles.
indigenous language.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
We're-
so when it
we're
came to
regular motivational
writing,
pod.
it was just a way for me to express myself that didn't even involve other people at the time. I didn't write to write for films. I was just writing every night because I was bored and by myself, and I had stuff to say. So it just came out in a script form.
So where does, and if I'm jumping too far ahead, Mackenzie, let me know, but when it comes to Barely Breathing, like, where does that fit into this process? How long ago, you started writing? You said about 7 years ago. So at what point did this script start getting worked on? And like, can you tell us how that came to be a finished product?
Yeah, Barely Breathing it's a wild story. So about 25 years ago, my mom almost passed away. And she didn't. She survived, but her death was like my biggest fear in life. And about 5-ish years ago, I remember I was just in another part of the story is when I was in high school, I was put on suicide watch. I went to school, someone heard me say something and they reported me. And so my mom had to come pick me up, and they had to explain to her why she was picking me up. And she was just like blindsided. So I told myself that if I ever did anything to harm myself, I would make it look like an accident, because I wouldn't want my parents to blame themselves. So no note, no nothing. It would just be like, this happened by accident, and it would be a tragedy. And then 5 years ago, I was in a really dark place. I was just by myself. I still was drinking at this time, and I was just not in a good headspace. And so I decided to just start writing a script. I had never written a script before. I was like, I'm just going to write a script. And it was based off all my biggest fears coming true, because that was like my way of processing all these things that I was thinking about. So my biggest fear of my mom passing away. So in the script, my mom passes away, years ago, even though she was alive at the time. In the script, I try to make my suicide look like an accident, and I fail and I have to face the music with everyone. In the script,
Mm-hmm.
my dad remarries, which is another thing I think about. But him and my mom were together at the time. In the script, I was an only child. I'm not an only child in real life. So I took all the things that I was like, I put myself in the worst place basically, so I could just figure out what I would do, how I would get out of it. And so, yeah, I wrote a script about all my worst fears coming true. And that's how Barely Breathing was born. And the whole journey in the movie is from like my worst fears coming true to me finding love again. Not necessarily romantic love, but love for the love of my mom and whatnot. And the wild thing about Barely Breathing was we filmed it. We were filming it on the last day of filming. I got a text from my parents. They were in Idaho that my mom and dad had caught COVID together. And then a couple days later, my mom was airlifted to a hospital in Salt Lake City, Utah. She was put on a ventilator immediately, and then she spent 40 plus days on a ventilator before passing away. So we had already filmed, I'd already written, filmed, and shot Barely Breathing before all the stuff in the movie happened. So all the stuff I wrote about in the movie, my mom passing away, that happened after. So it was just like a hypothetical what if, and then it happened after. And so, yeah, that's the wild, I don't want to say irony, but that's just the wild twist in Barely Breathing was I wrote this movie about all my worst fears coming true, and then they all came true after.
That's it is a wild story. I mean, for lack of a better word, but do you feel like that helped prepare you in any way? It feels like prescient almost the way that it came about as far as the subject.
Yeah, I don't know if anything could prepare me. I think it just it gave me in a way it gave me a way to appreciate her before she passed away. It was I was thinking about the worst thing that could happen to me, and when the worst thing that happens to you happens, it's never what you think. It's always probably worse. But that kind of just goes to show that you can never prepare yourself for any of the big things that are going to break you in life. They just break you. No matter how strong you are, how many times it's happened before, when the big thing comes and it takes you out, it takes you out. What you do after is the most important part. And so that was what Barely Breathing helped me. Like at a point I didn't want to finish the movie. We were editing it. We'd already gotten a first cut. Even before my mom passed away, she was on a ventilator and the director had sent a first cut of the film. I didn't know if I wanted to finish it or do the pickup shots or, do the editing. I just was like, at this point it felt too real, but my team was super supportive. And at the end of the day, like it wasn't real. The movie was fake, it was based on real emotions and real things, but there were other people depending on me. We had put time and effort into that. And I wanted to make sure I finished it for them, but I also wanted to make sure I finished it for myself because I made the movie for a reason. It was always a love letter to my mom, whether she was here or not. It was always going to be that, a love letter to her. So I wanted to make sure that I finished it for those reasons, to make sure that I followed through on the thing that I believed in the most, which was this movie that a lot of people told me wasn't a good idea and not to make, because they would read the script and it was like, how are we going to laugh and feel this way at the same time? And it's from where the movie starts to where it ends, there's a journey there.
Yeah. But to Lamar's point, you can do so much in a short film. You can do so much in 20 minutes, and you do take us on that journey. And it's really interesting to hear the timeline, because I actually had a misconception about that. I mean, I knew a little bit from following you that your mom had passed, and I sort of thought the timeline was actually a little different. And your performance in particular felt, the graveyard scene in particular, I should say, was one that really resonated for me, of like, this feels so real. And hearing you describe it, it makes sense, right? Of like, this is a genuine fear. This was something that was terrifying. And I think it's such a testament to what you were trying to do both before and after your mom passed, that you were able to finish it, because it would be completely understandable if you couldn't,
Yeah.
and
No, I thank you so much.
I think it's a beautiful result. you know? So thank you for sharing it with us, because that's both the story and the work, because that's such a feat.
Yeah, and I think short films, they don't like. I wish more people were into short films, especially with the way society is going, where we don't want to watch something for 2 hours. Like,
Yeah,
because the amount of work it takes to make a short film is exactly the same. The
exactly the
same
same.
crew, the same everything. It's just you're doing it for less amount of days. That's it.
Yeah.
But it still takes a couple of years to make a short film. It doesn't happen.
Development,
Yeah, it doesn't
production.
happen right away, and yeah, it's hard. But people just don't understand. And I think a lot of the reason why I feel I like Barely Breathing is because I don't have any writing training. No one taught me how to be a writer. I never even seen a short. I'd seen like one or two short films, but never been to a film festival before Barely Breathing.
Oh,
So I
okay,
didn't
okay.
know. But I think most people, when they do short films, they do like a slice of life thing
Yeah.
where it happens kind of within this time frame, But I didn't know that was what you were supposed to do. I just wrote this based on all the movies I'd seen growing up, which was just like I made it like a movie in my
Yeah.
mind. I wanted it to be like a journey. I wanted time to go past. I wanted there to be a montage in there. No one does a montage in
Yeah.
a short film because it's a waste of time. But
Yeah. But
for
it's a
me,
great montage. It's a hilarious
I think
montage.
you need that moment of levity in there.
yeah,
Yeah.
but for me, it was just because I wanted it, and the director was like, "Yeah, we're putting a montage." I'm like, "Okay, cool." Every other
Fuck
director
yeah,
was
let's
like,
do a
"We're taking
montage.
all these producers, like, we're taking this montage out. It's 2.5 minutes, and we don't need that in a short film." I'm like, "But you don't
Yeah.
understand. It's a montage. Like,
It's a
it just
montage. It's critical.
yeah, it's critical." But no, but like, I think sometimes not knowing the rules helps, or not
Yeah.
knowing the way things are supposed to be helps, because then you're just making it for you. And
Yeah.
if it's honest enough, people will gravitate and resonate with it. And that's why I think people like Barely Breathing, is because I wasn't making it for anyone else but for me. And the director, he was making it for him too. He's trying to make his movie.
Yeah.
So we were making it so
Yeah.
we could have like a cool thing for us that we were proud of.
Yeah.
I love
I'm sitting
that.
over here like trying not to get emotional as you've been speaking for the last like 10 minutes or so, because a lot of it's hitting home, and I wish I had saved that favorite color question. It's just a softball to throw your way right now. But no, like, thank you for like Mackenzie said, sharing all of that, and for being vulnerable, and not just in our interactions today, but in the film itself. As somebody who, as a man who went through my own bout of depression and similar thoughts of, if I were to off myself, what would that be, and how would I make it less of a strain on my family who shared those same thoughts, and but then also the second half of it with the relationship with parents. And I think I had the same thought as Mackenzie of, oh, this must have been sort of a cathartic experience, and it clearly wasn't. But as somebody who is lucky enough to still have their parents, that last letter still lands, and it's something I think everyone can relate to. And so, just speaking of what I said earlier about what can you do in 20 minutes of film, it's just this incredible wave where you're laughing for the first 10 minutes, and then shit hits, you realize what's happening, and it hits home, and you ride this emotional wave through the rest of it. So yeah, just kudos to you is all I wanted to say.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I think I actually hate watching the movie with people, because I feel like I'm like biasing their like opinion of it. So
They have to love it because you're right there.
even at film festivals, my least favorite part is like the movie and talking about it afterwards.
Watching.
My favorite part though is people coming up to me afterwards and relating to it. And when I first wrote the movie, people told me that my character was not relatable because of how it starts out. It starts out very aggressively and sexual. And I did that on purpose because I wanted to show people that what you think this guy is unrelatable is all the same things we deal with, right? And so seeing people relate to the movie and seeing people feel the love I have for my parents, my dad, my mom, it's really special, because to hear their stories and see how it affected them, that's what makes it worth it for me. It's, we've won awards, but who cares? Honestly, I don't care about that as much as just seeing people grab onto something that I made and having it affect them in a real visceral way, and then having them share like their experiences, parents they've lost, or the relationship, or people say like, I'm gonna go home and call my mom. Like just that in itself makes it worth it.
Yeah, I think it's loss of any kind is something that everybody can resonate with. So even though, to your point, that it starts kind of intense for some audiences potentially as far as the subject matter, one, it's really, you make it so funny that it's accessible. You know, it feels like you can follow the story and you add all these great nuggets to it. But also, yeah, the ultimate loss that you experience here, and also the way your character is trying to cope with it. And you know, you're making a joke in the support group about like, hey, it's cool, I can joke about it.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, we all go through those periods with our grief of whatever kind, of like, I've got it, this is my coping mechanism, I'm just trying to deal with this. And I think regardless of the subject matter or the exact character, people can resonate with that and identify with that. And I think, like we've said a couple of times now, if you're telling a genuine story, then people are going to watch and relate and enjoy. And it felt very genuine in that way, for sure.
Yeah, and a lot like Kneecap is like there's a lot of me in Barely Breathing. I've put myself in there a lot, but the autoerotic asphyxiation, that's not real. I don't do that, but I put that in the movie because that's the funniest way for me to introduce comedy in the movie, to fake a suicide, or to have like a suicide look accidental, was autoerotic,
Right.
because I couldn't think of another way for the audience to deal with this really heavy subject and not be immediately saddened by it. So I
was sitting over here not wearing a belt in solidarity with you, and
because we don't kink shame here, okay?
Yeah.
Like we are supportive, right?
No,
you know?
it's I wanted the movie to be funny, but I also wanted, I think a lot of times comedies do this thing where they're serious for like a second. They get serious for 1 second and then they jump off of it because they're so afraid of not getting the laugh back.
The laugh.
And that's what the number one critique I got about the script from all these producers was, you can't go from this to this and have people still laugh at the end. And I was like, I took that as a challenge. I'm like, I'll show you, like, I'll make people laugh during a cemetery scene. Like I will find a way to make it genuine and make people laugh, because at the end of the day, we're not one thing. You can be funny and sad. You can be all these things at once. You can't. Life isn't just this like even keel where we're one thing all the time. So,
and I think there's like these. You do a great job in the film of using sort of these hard left turns of comedy. I think what you're mentioning, I've mentioned on the pod before. If it's kind of like this Marvel effect, where it feels like every time a Marvel movie gets serious and there's a quip. They throw something in there to get the audience back, you know, excited or happy in some form. But in this, I think you do a great job. Like you said in the cemetery, the one that got me the most, I think, was when after you read the letter, you tell the truth to your dad, the character, you guys are embracing, and he says that phrase to you in Hindi, and you're like, as the audience, you're like, this is such a heartfelt moment, and then he's like, I still don't speak Hindi. Just that is such a great hard left turn. So I think you nail that in there.
And like
it's
everything, like the voicemails in the
moment,
movie were real. Like my mom, there's a real voicemail she sent me, but we just got my sister to say my character's name where my name would have been in the voicemail, so we got her to dub that in. But the rest of the voicemails are all like legit. There's like real home video and everything. So like I said, like a lot of similarities to Kneecap. Is like was a story about me, but it's not my story, right? Wasn't the timeline isn't exactly accurate, but the truth.
Well, and I think you do a great job of that, of like balancing, bringing through your story and riffing on it and changing it. I mean, in the interest of giving you a softball question as well, I'm curious though, from like a production side, how did you find your partners in this? I mean, you said as well, like the director made this film for themselves as well, their own project they wanted to build. You had other producers and things like that. Like, how did you find your crew?
It was really hard because I didn't know how to make a movie, and I didn't want to take money from people, so I put my own money into it, and I just sent my script out to everyone, as many people that wanted to read it, not just producers and directors, but regular people that weren't even in the film industry. So for like 2 years, I was just doing that because no one really cared. Like they wanted to make it, but they wanted to make it their way.
Right.
Then I would just take notes from like people, and then I would just like keep editing. It was like a fake thing. I was just making this movie, but it was never going to leave my script page because no one wanted to make it. And then I bumped into the director when I was ice skating with a friend. He was with another group of friends ice skating, and I had met him once. I had hosted something for his one of his projects that one of my friends was in, but we had met for like 3 seconds. And then both groups combined, we went to dinner afterwards, and everyone was drinking. And I was like, hey, can I email you my script? And he's like, yeah, sure. And I emailed it to him, and we knew each other so little that he had to email me back and say, hey, what's your cell phone so I can call you? Because we didn't. And then he was like, I want to make this movie. I believe in it. And he just got the movie, and he didn't want to change it or bastardize it at all. He just wanted to make that movie with his own spin on it. That was the first time I had anyone that was just like, this is the movie
like
I
this
want to
as
make.
it is.
Yeah. And they got the themes, and he sent me his work, but at that point I didn't care. I didn't know he was as talented as he was, honestly, because I didn't know what a director did.
Yeah.
I was like, you can tell the actors what to do. Anyone can do that, but the director does so much. And he also edited the movie too. His name's Derek Evans. He's such a brilliant dude, and it was just random chance, but the feeling was there, and it was
meant to be.
Yeah, and no one could have told my story like he told it. And a lot of people are like, why didn't you direct it yourself? I go, because I have no idea what I was doing. Yeah. And then he brought on a producer, Jamie Flanagan. And then I had a friend who I brought on as a producer as well. And that was it. Our groups had never met or worked together at all on a film before. So it was my first time working with Derek and Jamie, and it was their first time working with the other producer, Alina Leah. So like I said, sometimes it just works out.
Yeah. It just gelled. What do you think he brought specifically? You said nobody could tell the story the way that he did. What do you think he brought to the project in that way?
Everything. I mean, there's so many things that a director does. But I'm saying, like, I just have a script, right? That's what I wrote. I was a script, and I wanted to be the guy that acted in it. But all the other stuff, as far as like, Derek would give me notes on, let's rewrite this scene so it flows better into this, because I'd never made a movie before, and he would come up with great ideas. He did great directing the actors. He did great managing the project. He also edited the movie. And even like, I'll give the first thing. The intro scene is like this big stunt, right? In the script, I had written a stunt out, but he's the one that crafted that stunt, that designed it, that worked with the stunt coordinator to get exactly how I want it. And that's why it's so funny, is because that's all him. You know, in the script, I just wrote, Neal's doing this, and then he falls through the table, you know.
Yeah.
But Derek is the one that made that real,
makes it happen.
Yeah. And so,
well, it's good you told us, because we wanted to know, was this a stuntman? What happened with that
wanted to know
particular
if you
scene?
had an ass double.
Lamar wanted to know if you had an ass double.
We could not. We could. So
we could not afford an ass double.
We could not. I wanted an ass double. We could not afford one. And I was like trying to get away from like not showing my ass, but Derek and I were like, this will be so much funnier if you do. And I was like, you're right.
Yeah.
And so we rehearsed. We only had 2 breakaway tables. We only had 2 takes to get the shot right. And we rehearsed with like a fake styrofoam table that we made. And we rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed. And we rehearsed with the stunt coordinator. And the day of, the stunt coordinator wasn't there, which I was happy about, because he was restricting me from choking myself too hard because it was not safe, right? But I wanted to look real in the movie.
Imagine that. He's trying to save it.
Yeah, trying to protect my life. But I wanted to look real in the movie. So when he couldn't come, we tried to get a backup stunt coordinator. They couldn't come. Don't do this, by the way. But I talked with Derek. Derek and I had like a signal. I told him, I was like, let me do it the way I want to do it and make it look real. And if there's something's going wrong, I had like a hand signal, and then you can cut and whatever. So people are like, that looks so real, the way you were acting.
Yeah.
It's not, I'm actually choking. The belt is wedged.
I'm choking a little.
The spit coming from my mouth is like legit. But it sold the whole scene so much better than, you know, like just being like that. Like fake. So I'm glad it worked out. Everything worked out. But we only had 2 takes to do it. We did 2 takes, and we nailed both of them because we had rehearsed so many times. But again, that's like just having a good director who was on the mark, and a good crew. Everyone was just, we were in
an absent stunt coordinator. That's key. Yeah.
No, but like Derek was the one that found the DP. He's the one that edited the movie, and he's the one that came up with ideas like, we're gonna put your mom's home videos in there too, and he did all the most of the sound. So he did so much. He had so much hands on this, telling the story, and that's what I'm saying. If you find someone that can work with you in that kind of way and bring this, because a script is just words, it's not a real thing. A movie is this organism that takes a million people to make, and you need to have at least one person that can write the ship,
wrangle it all, bring it all together. Yeah,
that's totally him, because I never made a movie before. That none of that is me. I was glad that it wasn't me, because I wouldn't have been able to act and be the writer and producer and direct, like not knowing what I was doing. No way.
Yeah, first time out, that sounds super ambitious and very much impossible to do. Almost impossible, I should say. People can do things, but I mean, now time for the dreaded question of like, what is your next project? Where do you think you're going? Like, what do you want to do next? Do you want to focus on stand up? Do you want to keep doing film? Like, what are you thinking? I just saw you in like a Netflix, what is it? A Man in Full or something.
Yeah,
so you're still out there acting and stuff. So what's your plan?
Acting I love acting. I don't like tell people I'm trying to be an actor, because I don't want them to be like, where did this come from? So I act because I like doing it. And so, I don't post about this. Maybe every now, someone told me that I need to be better at marketing myself. So I think I might've started posting about some of the acting stuff that I do, but it doesn't interest me. Like posting about it. I just want to do it. I look at it like a job. Like I get a lot of joy out of it, and it's fun. And I've met some of my best friends in life through acting, and I will always want to do that. As far as what I'm doing next, I have a couple writing projects I've lined up. I'm finishing a feature right now, a rom-com, and I want to make that. And I've written a couple other short films. I think I'm going to try to get money for the feature, because I'd rather do that. A lot of people, this is again thanks to Derek, with their first film. Like I made my first short film. Usually it's not great, but we had like such a good run on my first film that I feel like I have enough momentum to do something bigger. I don't want to just keep making short films. I want to try something bigger. And
you've built some real credibility. Such a great product.
Yeah. And so I'm trying to stay busy and trying to write. Acting has been weird this past year because there's a strike for 6 months. So a lot of us couldn't work for a long time. We filmed The Man in Full before the strike, and then the strike happened. They couldn't finish it for a long time, and then they finally finished it after a strike. So I think Man in Full was like 2023, or we finished it, or 2022. I can't remember. It was a long time ago when we finished filming it. But
I just stumbled on it too. So I was like, oh, hey, I know that.
Yeah,
guy.
I did that. I was in like the Righteous Gemstones for like a second. I started on this show called Claws. That's where I met my best friend, which is a great show on TNT. If you ever guys want to, I think it's on Hulu now. It's such a funny show. Like totally encourage everyone to watch it. It's so funny, weird, and smart, and campy, and silly, but it's great.
I love it. Okay, well, we're going to keep an eye out, and feel free if you need some script readers, send it our way. We'll read all the things.
For sure. I was going to say, if you need help with marketing yourself, there's this website that I use called LinkedIn, and I'll just put on there like once a day, hey, does anybody need an actor? I'm here.
The whole
Lemar master marketer.
For people that aren't in the biz, like I know people want to be famous actors. I just want to be a working actor, and also I like telling my story, and I want to be able to write and tell my stories. And that's why I started writing, was because no one would cast me as the dude in Barely Breathing, because they would just think I'd be this weird, funny guy, and they would never see me as anything serious. So I wrote Barely Breathing not to get into festivals. I mean, I wrote it just as a piece to have for myself, like, to show my agents and people, like, look, I can do other stuff. Like that was it. The festival stuff came after, but that wasn't the reason I made it. And I think that's kind of why I appreciate when a festival takes us on, because we didn't make it for them. It's long for festival films. 12 to 15 minutes is usually the sweet spot. Ours is 20, which is a kiss of death for most films.
Not for this one. Not for this one, apparently.
Thank God.
Well received.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a lot of that has to do with Austin, because we got into Austin early on, and we won audience choice there, and that momentum from that got us into like a lot of festivals, because Austin has the best reputation. Like, so
Well, that leads into what I was going to say. We can cut this part out, but I have a friend who's in film production, a good friend who's like directs a lot of work here, actually. So I'd love to connect y'all too, because I know she's got her ear to the ground on a bunch of things, and much she actually hasn't. We've been meaning to have her on the pod as well. And she has directed a ton of projects, and I know she could be a great resource and give you legitimate feedback when it comes to, you know, the work. But we're just audiences over here, right? Like former
you know
theater
what?
kids unite. But
you know what's crazy though? I found some of the best feedback I got was from people that weren't in the industry. Like, I was dating this girl when I first wrote Barely Breathing, and the feedback she gave was so good. It changed the whole dynamic of the script because she wasn't coming from a place of judgment. She was just someone that read it, and she didn't have, like, she wasn't a movie snob. She wasn't in the industry at all. She was just a regular person that read it and was like, this is what I think would make the story better. I was like, you're right.
It's almost like they're not reading it as a product.
They're not reading it
as part of a industry good that needs to be marketed and bought.
So my advice, one of the questions, well, what advice do you give to writers? I would say stop sending your scripts just to directors and producers. Like, send it to people, audiences that you would want to and see if they like it. If they can read a script and they've never made a movie before and they can see and feel stuff in it, then it's a good script. Right. And the other advice I give for writers is take an acting class. Whether you want to be an actor or not, take an acting class so when you write, you understand the limitations of what you're writing as far as like what actors will be able to pull off. And then
what they can convey,
you'll be able to write something a lot more seamless, because there are writers that have never taken acting class, and you can tell because the dialogue is like it's not written like the real world. And actors is
I think that's so true, because I mean, if I just think back to the time that I was reading scripts, there were definitely many of those moments where you were like, this doesn't feel like you can pull this off, you know, it doesn't feel like you can get this off the page, or this is too monologue heavy or what have you. And the only reason they picked me is like, I was an English lit major, as you maybe can tell. Right. And so, you know, I read a lot. And so they were like, well, we just want your like storytelling analysis. Right. And looking at it as a feature. And you're like, I'm not going to get this when you put it on a screen. Or people who, again, are not, you know, prolific filmmakers, but just write a story in a way that, jumps off the page. I think that's really interesting how that can come about with, you know, non-writers potentially. That's awesome. Well, great advice.
I was going to just one last thing on that. Like, if I'm writing a script, what's the proper amount of Transformers to put into a script? Like, is one in a movie, is that enough, or do you have to have at least 2 Transformers for a film to be successful?
I mean, like,
I think you need
Autobots and Decepticons.
Yes, Hasbro.
You can't just have one, because who's that one person going to fight? You have to have
he's just an army.
Transformers, plural, right? You need at least 2.
If it's just Transformers, it's the Bumblebee movie, and even that's a little.
Listen, Bumblebee was cute. I mean,
it was
cute,
give him credit. But so we need more than one Transformer.
We need more. We do need more.
Okay. That was my main question coming into today.
At first, I thought it was like Transformer, like a literary term. I don't know, because I like I said, I don't have any training. I was like trying to think of like, does he mean transitions?
No, Decepticon. You were on it.
Okay.
I have an unrelated question that we absolutely will and can't cut. I'm a fan of your dog Forever. That you post about all the time, and
Forever, come
here. I want to know. I want to meet Forever. Oh,
she's deep in sleep. Come here, girl.
Hi, baby.
Come here.
Oh my goodness.
Come here, girl.
Okay, now we're not cutting this. Everybody needs to see this.
Oh, girl, come on. You can't see because of them. Come on.
She's like, I'm tired.
I know. She's deep. She's
oh,
deep in sleep.
Pobrecita. What, Dad? What are we talking about? I know. How old is she now?
She's almost 11. She's 10 and a half. A little over 10 and a half.
So precious. Yeah. So precious. I love her. Yeah. Every time you post a picture of her, I'm like, immediately hard eyes. Love her. Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I know we took up so much of your Saturday.
No, it's all good.
Thank you for giving us so much time. Thanks for bringing Forever for me to see as well. That was my favorite. Do you want to share with the folks where they can find you if they want to follow you and hear about this stuff in the future potentially?
Yeah, you could follow me on Instagram. It's at Neal Loves You, NEALLOVESYOU, all spelled out. And that's the same thing for TikTok, but I got like 200 followers on TikTok, so I don't really. I mean, like,
I think we have
We are
6.
also terrible TikTokers, if it makes you feel any better. But we have Instagram. We will share that.
I'm trying to do Instagram, and like they want me to do. The TikTok came out. I'm like, I can't do both. It's too much.
Instagram is hard enough, I think.
No.
Yeah, Lemar and I have to tag team it. It's still a lot. So, but we will
thing.
share out this episode. We'll tag you. We'll share it with you. People will be able to find you for sure.
Cool. Yeah, I was doing this thing where I was like, for 100 days, I wanted to post a reel a day, and I just did 50 days. I'm taking like a 3-day break, and then I'm gonna do 50 more. And
wow,
it's hard because most of the time I'm just like right before midnight, just finding something stupid to post, and it's like not thought out. So the first 50 I did like that. The next 50 I'm gonna like think about what I'm gonna post, and then
you need to go back to those vines. They're shorter, quicker. Get those vines back out there.
Yeah. But my buddy made a good point. He's like, just do it for yourself. Don't think about followers or marketing, and just find what you like making, because eventually people will gravitate to what you like. So I'm like, okay, cool. Just do it.
Yeah, you'll find your people that way for sure. I think so. Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us, and thank you guys and listeners for coming and listening to us. Come back next week where we're going to jump into February, which is a full month of Oscars films, because your girl can't watch pod movies and Oscar movies without collapsing. So we will be talking about Neal's favorite, Wicked. So
it's not. Listen, I don't hate Wicked. I just think it's wildly overrated. It is.
I'm a theater kid, so for me, it was the greatest thing.
I love Wicked. The stage show, I love.
Yeah,
love it. The movie is so hollow and fake. We're gonna
have to have you come back and talk about it then. Well, where do they find us, Lemar?
Yeah, you guys can find us on Instagram. That's where we're most active. Stories, polls, reels, all that good stuff. You can email us, we drink and we watch things pod at Gmail if you have suggestions or feedback or commentary or anything at all. So yeah, reach out.
Also find us on YouTube, because your girl spent literal hours republishing our entire YouTube. It's so much better. And we have lots more videos, and I really don't want it to be for nothing. So please go there and look at it. Love y'all. But for now, go have a drink and watch a thing. Cheers.
See you guys.